Okay, I guess we can give it a minute until 6:30 and then get started. 6:30. Good evening, everyone. I am Felice Farber, co-chair of the Budget Committee, and I'm here tonight with Billy Friedland, other co-chair. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we are going to continue our discussions of the Arts Committee and Zoning and Development Committee budget requests. I'll kick it off to Billy, if you're good with that, and we can just provide an update on where we are on zoning and development budget request.
Good evening, everybody. As Felice mentioned, my name is Billy Freeland, co-chair of the Budget Committee. Our first item tonight that we want to discuss relates to zoning. As we've talked about a few times as a committee, it deals with funding for Tuck Edelstein of Edelstein Architecture. As you all will recall, Edelstein Architecture was engaged to work on the a proposal to DCP for an application to rezone parts of Community District 8 for a 210-foot height limit. We passed a resolution in this committee back in October that was encumbering $10,000 of additional funding. But that resolution was replaced at the October full board meeting with a resolution, and I'll sort of just summarize it briefly, but it was very similar to the resolution we had initially disapproved as a committee. And that resolution called for mentioned how Edelstein requires a contract to perform additional work, how CB8 members have raised questions about transparency, communication, and information provision, such as monthly reports, next steps, hours worked, and more, and said that we'd vote on encumbering funds at a future meeting contingent on being provided with a work plan for next steps. So over the last few weeks, we've been in touch with Edelstein Architecture to get that information. And where we're at right now is we got an email from Tuck Friday providing some information, some of which we had seen before. But in reviewing it, it didn't really contain what we viewed as a work plan for future work, which was a little bit concerning. It wasn't quite the information we were looking for. It also, I think, provided some maybe new information that I perhaps had not previously appreciated. And so maybe we can discuss this. But it included an email that Tuck had sent to the zoning committee, members of whom are present today and can speak to this. But this is back in September. And a couple things that I guess was noteworthy. One is he described the current status of his project, of his work, being in what he calls phase 2. And for those who need a refresher, he sort of breaks down his process in 5 phases. The first of which was the initial pre-application submittal work. But then the second phase, this is the one we're in, is developing pre-application submittals and related through initial interdivisional meeting is what it's called. But frankly, not all of that is perfectly clear to me. But where he said that they were in that phase is they just finished the pre-application submittal follow-up. This is responding to the Department of City Planning requests following the initial pre-application submittals. He's indicated that they're past that stage, and they're at the stage of the initial interdivisional meeting with DCP, which Tuck describes as meeting with the Department of City Planning team to identify necessary actions, guide preparation of application materials, conduct environmental and technical analyses, and so forth. And the reason that's relevant is his email also said that he asked whether anyone had been in touch or heard from DCP regarding the pre-application material submitted in May. So I guess, one question we can discuss this in a bit is, whether we have or he has heard from Department of City Planning in any way about what he submitted back in May. I know it's a lot, and I apologize to those who maybe aren't as familiar with the details, although looking at the audience on the Zoom, at least, I think almost everyone here is pretty familiar with this. But I think it brings us to a place, and I'll leave it to, I'll hand it over to Felice to add anything that I'm missing, perhaps, where we still are looking for a work plan about what's next to better inform the amount that we would potentially need to budget to Tuck going forward. I'll just note that phase 2, which again is what we're in the middle of, it says the budget for phase 2 as a whole should be $20,000 to $30,000. Now we're already through part of phase 2, which to my untrained eye seemed to be one of the most time intensive and perhaps financially intensive parts of the phase, which is the actual writing up of the pre-application submittals and getting those through to DCP. But maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think we still have some questions about what the actual amount to be budgeted would need to be, and what Tuck's work plan going forward is. Hopefully that summary did some justice. I'm sure I've missed a bit, but Felice, is there anything that jumps out to you that you'd like to add?
Thanks, Billy. I think that was a really good summary that laid out where we were. I think, as the resolution from the full board meeting, we're looking for just some clear direction on where we're heading, what that means in terms of a work plan and next steps. And that's something that we don't currently have.
Great, thank you. So, with that said, I maybe I'll open up to the floor. I think, Felice and I feel, and we'll see what other committee members feel, that, we do need some more information before we can really take action. And so it may make sense to continue working on this through the next month, but I'll see if any hands are up, if anyone has comments, or physical hands. I'll take even a physical hand.
And just to clarify, this isn't a question about whether or not to proceed with a zoning application. This is not, that's something that's already been decided by the full board. This is just getting clarification on making sure that we're fiscally responsible in spending the money allocated to the community board.
Exactly, that's exactly right. So first hand I see up is Russell. Let's unmute Russell, please.
Thank you. So I think, in terms of where we're at, as you guys have both said, we don't have the work plan yet. I don't think we really need to dwell on this too much. I mean, basically, I am confident that we'll get the work plan. I've reached out to Tuck to have a conversation with him about, what sort of specifically I think we'll need to get from him, which I am confident we'll be able to get. And so that's, I think, sort of where we're at. I don't think we need to necessarily sort of try to piece together, what phase we're in or not in terms of information that we have so far or whatever. I think, ultimately the goal here is to get the thing that we're, that we've said we want to get, and I think we'll get it. And, getting something that's going to sort of provide the information that we're looking for in terms of what the next coming months are in this project. And so that, my impression is that is coming. I'm going to continue to work to essentially get that. And, I don't, in the absence of that, I don't think we need to go back and forth too much on this issue.
Thanks, Russell. Anthony?
Thank you, Billy. I had a reasonably long thing I was going to read, but I won't because I think we've all been over all of this a lot. I would like to say that if we ultimately do not do this, if we ultimately do not fund the continued work on this project, we should understand what that means. That the full board expressed support more than once for this application, for the zoning application, and defunding that effort negates the wishes of the community and their representatives. To abandon the effort now through defunding would send to city planning a very clear message. We don't care about the special districts. No reasonable person could conclude otherwise. Starting over with another search is not an option. Even the brightest replacement would need time to review what Tuck has already done, which is in fact the completion of that application, wasting precious time and money in the process of getting up to speed. Doubtless, this individual would want to retailer the application in ways that would further delay its implementation. And finally, without the protections of the special zoning districts, we will continue to be at the mercy of individuals and organizations who have no particular motives except maximizing their profit. And that's all I'll say for now, but whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And, I just will briefly say, I think, as Felice was saying, we view our role here as being stewards of the money in the right way, but not casting judgment on the decision of the board to pursue this. And, we want to make sure there's accountability and transparency. And I think that's something we all have an interest in. And frankly, anyone wanting the project to succeed, right, would have a strong interest in that. But so I appreciate your what you're saying, and we're not, at least from my perspective, we're not trying to defund anything, but we do, hope we can get the answers that we're seeking. Alita, you're up next, and then Michelle, and then Marco.
Hi, thank you. I don't understand the idea of needing a future plan for this, because what's going on is responsive to what city planning demands and asks for. I had a plumber come to my apartment today. There was a problem with my shower, a problem with my sink, a problem with my toilet, a problem with the sink in my kid's bathroom, and a problem with their toilet. And yet I had no idea what the plumber was going to charge, or what parts he needed, or how long it would take to fix it, or whether it could be fixed today. And so I had to be responsive to what he said was necessary. And that's what this feels like with city planning, which is that they make the call. They say what they need, and Tuck is supposed to respond. And the idea is to get the application through city planning. That we are in stage 2 indicates that he's been fulfilling the responsibilities that the board gave to him to do his job and to get the application through, insofar as city planning allows it to go through. And I think it's really important to understand that we're not tasking him with designing a building where you start from scratch. And Anthony, Marco, if I'm saying the wrong thing about designing a building, correct me. So we're not asking him to design a building. We're asking him to respond to what city planning is asking for. That's the phase. And to get some kind of future plan other than being responsive seems counterproductive, because what actually will happen will be that the committee won't approve of trying to fund him. And as Anthony said, and Russell said, the project will fall apart. And that sends a significant message. I also just want to add that for all of the people on the board who are concerned about affordable housing, for all of the people on the board who are concerned about affordable housing, this is a way to at least maintain rent regulated units insofar as possible, and the small businesses that we all say the community needs in order to maintain its vitality, its energy, its interest as a community. The more buildings that are lost are the more small businesses and the more affordable housing. You've all heard 14,000 units lost over the last, I guess, 15 years or so, more or less. And that's a lot of units. So for everyone who's interested in affordable housing, we're not seeing it. We're not seeing anything other than market rate and luxury housing, which I don't even think appeals to New Yorkers, because how many people can afford $5 and $7 and $12 million for a starting price for an apartment? So we're losing a lot as a community by dilly-dallying and not spending time on this. And it is a way of keeping the community vital for everybody, not just for the super wealthy, which is not what we as a community board want to do. So I think for now I'll end here, but to say that Tuck has been doing his job. The proof is in the pudding. The application has been moving forward through city planning. So thank you very much. And well, I guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alita. Michelle, you're up next.
Thank you, Billy. Yes, I think we can all agree Tuck is doing his job. We have evidence that he's doing his job. And in terms of what you are asking for phase 3, I believe that appears in this original document where he outlines what phase 3 is. He has been in touch with the Zoning and Development Committee. That, in my opinion, is where this lies. They are the ones who negotiated the contract. They are the ones who asked for the terms of the contract. They are the ones who approved it. And most importantly, they are the ones who are knowledgeable with what this process is and what each part of the contract should include. So while I understand that some in the Budget Committee were very concerned about the outlaying of funds without this paper trail, I would like to point out a couple of things. Number one, there are very few projects that go on in the city of New York or in the state of New York that are fully funded in advance of implementation. I would venture to say nothing is fully funded in advance of implementation. If the people on this board who have concerns here truly want to see this project go forward, they surely should be comfortable on yielding to the judgment of those on the committee who have negotiated the contract, who have followed the contract, who know Tuck, who have worked with him. I also want to point out that on the November 17th, 2020 resolution about hiring Tuck, the people now that are saying that their only reservation is they don't think that his method of paperwork is up to snuff. I would venture to say there are a lot of very talented, successful, and accomplished people who are not great at paperwork. The point is, we want to know that he's doing the work, and we have every evidence that he did. But I just want to point out, and I'm not pointing to motives, I can't describe motives, but in that resolution on that date, calling for the hiring of Tuck, before there was any discussion of his ability to do paperwork to your satisfaction or anybody else's satisfaction, before there was any discussion except to support the fact that the community board wants this project, we have a few of you voted against it then. And that was in 2020. I don't have a rationale for that vote, but those were abstentions and an otherwise, there were 5 abstentions in an otherwise unanimous vote. So to say that this is a new issue and that you want to see the project go forward, we have evidence that back in 2020, you might have had some reservations then. Maybe you still have reservations, but I don't want to hang it on that you don't like his method of paperwork or that he hasn't been forthcoming with the committee. He certainly has, and the committee was in a position to have the best judgment here because they have the knowledge of what's going on. So all I can say is that if you think that some of these, and I will call them petty concerns, because in the overall picture, they can all be addressed. But if you think that addressing that or holding up or postponing or canceling this project is worth those concerns, I suggest you go back and look again. This project needs to go forward. We want it to go forward. The community wants it to go forward. The elected officials want it to go forward, and we have no reason to believe that we won't be successful and that we can't raise funds. A bunch of us are putting our heads together now, trying to figure out ways to raise funds, but I certainly would not jeopardize the monies that have already been given to us to support this project for this coming year. So I encourage the committee to please put those differences aside, yield to what the Zoning and Development Committee has to say. Look at the additional answers that Tuck had sent, listen to Russell's confidence, and have a resolution to continue. I think that is really important and in the best interest of everybody concerned. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in. I wasn't going to respond in the interest of time, but I feel compelled to. Michelle, you know, I have a lot of respect for you. I do find what you said went to motive, and I want to urge us as a committee not to try to ascribe motive to people, which is how I interpret that. And by the way, I don't know how I voted on that 2020 resolution. Maybe I was on one side or the other. but just speaking for those who may be here who voted against hiring Tuck, that doesn't in any way undermine their reasons for wanting to raise questions now. And I don't think it's productive to do so. And I think we as a board have seen enough division, and we haven't been together because of COVID, and just it's not been, and I'm not saying you're dividing, but I'm saying as a board, it's not helpful to ascribe motive. And that's what I thought happened. So let's please try to avoid doing that. And by the way, as a full board, we passed the resolution, the one that I just read at the beginning. So whether or not there's a few members of this committee who didn't want to engage Tuck, as a full board, we passed the resolution, which I think as a budget committee, we have an obligation to see through. And I read that resolution at the top of the meeting. So I just, let's not ascribe motive to people if we can. And if I'm wrong about that, won't be the first time. Okay. Marco, you're up next.
Thank you. Usually I work with bureaucrats, Department of Buildings. And when I file in the Department of Buildings, I always have a conversation with my client. And my client asks something that they shouldn't ask. I said, well, if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. Just let it happen, let it review the Department of Buildings, city planning too, and then you will hear what they're saying. Once they have a position, we must be compliant with that. Otherwise, we won't be approved. This is more or less the approach that I do. And that's, I think, Tuck he has been doing with the Department of Planning. A good example of that is an incompetent person with a mechanical systems was successful to approve these application in city planning. And I can demonstrate you want to go in that direction. So what we're doing right now is we don't want to supervise the application as long as maintain the goals of this application. What we would like to see is to send to city planning. City planning will declare complete or incomplete. If declared complete, now we will have in another stage to discuss in the public domain. We have to have meetings. In the meeting, we have an opportunity to hear the developer, to hear everybody. And then we can make a final determination. But at this level, to ask what you are satisfied or somebody's satisfaction in order to reach a good standard to have the application, or somebody is coming to make an assessment of what we're doing, what Tuck is doing, I think is wrong. Let it city planning, which is a qualified institution that coming with their own determination, and we have to supervise Tuck to comply with the requirement of city planning. This is the best approach. This is with experience I'm talking right now. I'm not talking that, oh, we need to prepare something before we have to do it that way. No, with the bureaucrats, you don't work that way. You listen what the bureaucrats they want, and you have to be in compliance. So I think I'm not going to dwell anymore, but the only thing I'm going to say, the city of Yes, of the Mayor Adams, he's calling for affordable housing. And I just checked, they asked 10 affordable units in one church, another 10 in another church, another 10 in another church. So basically, he's not doing nothing with respect to the affordable housing. We have an opportunity right here that these 4 avenues that will try to preserve affordable housing. We can negotiate the height in order to maintain and preserve the affordable housing, or maybe even increase. A good example is we just recently discussed the easement of 83rd Street and 72nd Street. These two developments will lose more than 60 affordable housing, and we have an opinion, a wrong opinion that never mentioned that. Even though our community needs that we send to city planning, we ranking our needs is affordable housing. So let's go maintain in this project Do not cut the money, because when you cut the money, you are saying that you want to do something behind all that, and that is wrong. My advice is, let's go continue with this project. We cannot stop. We have, I think, a good professional, and if he has some elements that we can debate, of course we have to do that, but we have to do in the right time, not before city planning even discovered that there are 1 points. So at this time, let's go start with that direction, and thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Gail, you're up next, followed by Rebecca and then Elizabeth. Gail, you're muted.
Gail, you should be getting a prompt. Yeah.
Sorry. My computer is being cranky today. What you said, Billy, is true. I think that every board member feels very strongly that we should have fiscal accountability for any project where there is CB funding. My concern is when we start to talk about the work plan, if we go back to the initial discussions and negotiations with Tuck's work plan was always done in concert with the co-chairs of the Zoning and Development Committee. So it wasn't as if he just went off on his own during these various phases from pre-application on. There was always the dialogue. There was always interaction with Elizabeth and Elaine, and then afterwards, Anthony with suggestions as to how is that working. Elizabeth, Alita, Elaine had meetings with city planning. So every step of the way, there has been a work plan, and the oversight has been in the Zoning and Development Committee. And I'm not a planner, but if Anthony and Marco and Elizabeth and others say the work plan going forward is going to have to be fluid. And I agree that Russell can probably secure some general information from Tuck for sure, but you're not going to get this specific plan as if it is designing a building, and this is step 1, step 2, step 3, because we don't know what city planning is going to ask for. So I think that perhaps we're just getting a little overwhelmed by something that to me seems pretty simple. We have that $10,000 from Julie Menning to move forward with this next phase. And however that money is going to be spent, absolutely, we should know what Tuck would plan to do, but that should really be in concert with the Zoning and Development Committee co-chairs, because they're the ones that are really shepherding this project forward and the ones that have the expertise. So I hope that we'll take a step back and understand also that there have been reports. And by the way, the reports over the past 4 years, Tuck has come in, he's made some presentations. Now he hasn't come to every meeting, because how can you bring a professional in, have them give you a presentation, but not pay them a fee for the work that they're doing, because that falls overall into the project at large. But one thing that I can point out is, as far back, if we look at all the agendas of the Zoning and Development Committee, an update on the 210 project was always on the agenda, and either Elizabeth or Elaine went into great detail as to where Tuck was, what had been achieved, what the challenges were. So I think when we're talking about, a concern about his paperwork, and also maybe as we go forward with the next contract, hopefully with him, when work is done, and like, for example, Will, if you're not getting the responsiveness and the co-chairs aren't aware of that, perhaps there's a way of letting them go ahead and do the follow-up, and then we might not have quite as many challenges. That's all I want to say for now.
Great. Thanks, Gail. Rebecca, you're up, followed by Elizabeth.
So I don't want to just say too much here, but I think as much as I believe that the actual work with Tuck should go through the zoning and development committee. I do think it would be helpful to consult the budget committee a little bit more, because even today we received an email from Tuck requesting to be paid an additional like $5,000 for work previously done. And because of the type of contract he signed, we are literally not allowed to pay him for that work. And no one has, I guess, communicated this to him, but also maybe no one was fully aware of the city rules on that. So I think without speaking to anything about the merit or actual details of the project, because that is the zoning and development area of expertise, I do think it's important to consult those who know a little bit more about how these contracts and funds work in the future, so that we're not, getting an email that at the end is like, I'm asking again for the fourth time, are you going to pay me for the work that I've already done when we can't do it?
Great.
And that was
Great.
communicated
Great
to him,
point.
by the way. Like he was fully aware that he could not be paid anything over 20,000. And even in his first email, he said, I understand that may be donated time.
Yeah, as I understand it, I don't think it's controversial in this committee that we're not going to pay him for that $5,000 extra, given what was just explained. But if anyone disagrees with that, we can get into it. But I do want to make sure Elizabeth has a chance to speak, and then we'll go back. Actually, well, then we'll go to Craig next, since he has not spoken, and then we'll go to people who have spoken once already. So Elizabeth, you're up.
I think that we're forgetting a couple of things. One is that not only is this the right thing to do, the community board has decided it's the right thing to do. The community board is the applicant for this proposal here. It is urgent. Threats to the existing affordable housing keep coming up. We've got a new threat of a building that's 520, would be 525 feet tall. And it be as of right under current law. We've got very good zoning on most of the Upper East Side, the R8B or 10A, a couple of this R9X, and these are the at-risk avenues. And among the many virtues, of course, is saving the affordable housing. I think building new affordable housing, absolutely great. Saving it is better because you save people's homes at the same time. And I think that in the past contract for the one that expired this June, I think, and in the information on the certification process that I sent to every member of this committee, what the next steps are described there. They're not, but it's not going to be, a perfectly simple thing. If he had started another contract in June with an estimate of spending, say, $1,000 every 2 months or something or other, till now, been completely wrong, because they have not responded yet. The city planning has not yet responded to our pre-application. So it wouldn't have spent a cent, but he could perfectly well have spent $5,000. And I think that we have worked with him for now about 5 years. We are perfectly satisfied with him. You may not be satisfied with his accounting practices, but I don't think that is a matter that should hold up a totally necessary proposal here. And I think we would be letting the community down, ourselves down, if we don't proceed with this and proceed with it immediately.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So Craig has not spoken yet, and then we'll go back to those who have, starting with Russell. But Craig, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Billy, and good evening, everyone. So I just want to, I guess I want to start by saying that I don't really think anyone here is talking about canceling the project, and I don't think we're debating as to whether it's the right thing to do or even the urgency of it. And I don't even think, contrary to what people have expressed, that this is a threat to defund the project. I mean, I think we'd look really bad as a board if we were to invest nearly $100,000 in something and then just say, no, we're not doing it anymore over this. I think we all want to seek a solution to it. And I don't think if anyone was considering the merits of this isn't the committee to do it. It's Zoning and Development Committee that we should be doing it. So I think we need to separate these issues. And I also just want to say, I don't think these are petty issues. I think the integrity of our board and our fiduciary responsibilities aren't a petty concern. We all know, and I think we've discussed this at length, that when a vendor isn't being fully transparent until they're pressed many times over to provide information and provides that information after the fact, that's not a petty issue. I think that's our jobs as we oversee budgets and funding and taxpayer money to make sure that we're keeping track of it and knowing that the consultant is doing what they're expected to do. And I think as Rebecca alluded to before, there's a disconnect here in terms of what the consultant, what Tuck has done and what he's actually able to do. And he's essentially donated services. And contrary to what was said at the last meeting when asked, he's clearly in email asked multiple times over if we would consider paying him for work performed that exceeded what was permitted in a micro purchase. To me, that's just alarming also, and speaks to the fact that we can't in good faith be just providing him with funding unless we really have a good sense of what he's doing, and he hasn't done that. And even if he were to, he's given us the outline of the work and how much he expects in general, and the fact that it's a fluid process. That's still not enough for us to be able to be in good faith say, okay, we know exactly what he's doing. It should be the other way around. It should be that he comes to us and says, I have this work that I need to do based off of where we are right now, based off of the response that I get from city planning. And then it's up to us as a community board, and whether it's zoning development or in conjunction with the board office or the board chair, to be able to agree to that work. And we have a clear understanding going into that work of how many hours are expected and what the maximum number of hours he could put into it is, then that would be the way to do it. Sort of an on-call type of contract as opposed to a retainer or paying him up front. And I think it's still important to recognize that whenever anyone budgets, you can't just budget in a vacuum for the current year. You have to think forward. And we don't know, as far as I know, to this point, how much he's spent thus far in phase 2, and how much work is remaining in phase 2 of that 20 to 30,000. And that's before we even start to have to think about phase 3, which he's estimating would be 150 to 200,000. So I think it's hard to knowing what we have to look forward to be at a point right now where we're getting nothing in terms of what even in the current phase we're expecting. So I would hope that we can just really consider where we are right now and the fact that this is truly a budget discussion here. And let's try to figure out how we can solve this issue. Let's try to get him to be able to provide us with what we've asked of him. And let's try to find a solution and move forward next month, hopefully, after he gets back to us. And I'm sure he will. I would hope that he knows what's going on. He could watch our videos. He could watch these budget committee meetings where he's seen these discussions. So he should be able to really have an understanding of what our expectations are. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. All right, we have Russell, then Anthony, then Michelle. Russell?
Thanks. So I think a lot of the comments here are sort of relitigating the discussion that we had last month. And at this point, we've already got the resolution that we've got, and we are where we are. And I say this as somebody who preferred the other resolution and not the one that ultimately passed. But, here we are. And so I don't think it's sort of constructive to keep going back and forth on the sort of question of whether we should be asking for this documentation or not. That's the discussion that we had last month. It came out the way it came out. Now we're in a position where the board has passed a resolution requiring certain documentation. And I was trying to, frankly, allay the concerns of folks who want this to move forward and want us to retain Tuck. I don't think the resolution that was passed prevents us from doing that. It simply puts in place certain requirements that we're going to need before we do it. And a number of us are in the process of trying to fulfill those requirements and overcome those, to fulfill the requests that have been made and to get the information that we need. And I think we're going to be able to do that. And that's what we're working on. Until we have that, unfortunately, we can't move forward. But that's all. And I think to the extent that it's going to require, or to the extent that there's some ambiguity or that it's difficult to estimate what the work is going to entail or that kind of thing, I think that's a sort of standard part of the process for a lot of professional contracts and a lot of things where, I just speaking as a lawyer, you of course don't know how much time you're going to spend on a given case. I think it's pretty typical for professional engagements where you don't know precisely how much time you're going to spend on something. You can't, but your client will ask you for an estimate, and you can provide an estimate based on your experience with similar kinds of things that you've done in the past, all the different kinds of things that go into an estimate, coming up with a range of what you think the hours might entail, all this kind of stuff. And so basically what as I understand what the committee is looking for, we're looking for a description of what kind of work is expected to be necessary over the course of the next few months on this that we would want Tuck to do, and just a sort of description of that nature, and an estimate of how much time might be required. And again, the estimate is going to have to be an estimate because no one has a crystal ball to know precisely how much, but just give us a sense of what we're looking for. And I think that that is achievable, and we are going to continue to work to get that. As soon as we have it, we can bring it to the committee and move forward on that basis. So I just want to sort of remind everybody where we are based on action that the board has already taken. That's not going to be changed. That's a vote that full board took last month on how to sort of move forward here, but that doesn't put a hold on this. It's just, it's just giving us things that we need to do in order to move forward, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Russell. I think I agree with that assessment entirely. Anthony.
Thank you. Look, I agree with Russell. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First, to underline what both Alita and Marco, the points they made. As an architect, I can say with some confidence that it is impossible to judge how long it will take to do something. And frankly, I have had more jobs where I have contributed time to the residences of multimillionaires than I have had them contribute time and money to me. But that's just the way it is. And finally, and I promise to stop now and I won't talk again tonight, we talk about good faith and doing things in good faith. And this is a surprise for me. St. Paul describes faith as the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. We cannot tell the future. That's not St. Paul, that's me. And I think it's important that we remember that, and that anything we get from Tuck is going to be somewhat speculative. And this very large sum of money is only a small amount of what will be required to get this project done. And it is important that we have faith that this project, which is the right thing to do, should go forward and become part of the city's zoning resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. So we have Michelle and Rebecca, and I think after Rebecca, Alita's hand is up, and then I think that makes sense to move on to our next agenda item in light of what Russell said. Michelle, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, bear in mind that we are the applicant for this. So to back down or defund it, we are defunding our own application, our own position. To defund something is to be against it. So it's very difficult to say, I'm for this, I think it's fabulous, I think it's wonderful, but I don't want to put any money behind it. You know, that just doesn't wash. And forgive me, Billy, but sometimes stating the fact is not divisive. I just stated a fact, that's all. I hope that we are all in agreement that we want this project to go forward. I hope that is the case, but getting stuck on whether or not some paperwork was submitted on time, to me, is not a friendly way of making sure that this project goes forward. And so I can't help but hang my hat on that. Russell expressed it very eloquently. He laid it out. It is how it is. But I do have to ask one question. I don't really understand. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't understand why phase 3, as outlined on this document, is not considered the forward plan. What is it? And I really sincerely would like an additional answer to this, because I don't understand. So I'm not asking this sarcastically. I'm asking it really. Explain to me what it is that you're looking for that isn't on here. I would appreciate that explanation.
I think I can start to give a partial answer, Michelle. A couple of things. One is our understanding is that he's not in phase 3 right now. He's in phase 2, not phase 3, is what he told us in September. Now, Michelle, phase 2, as you'll see on that sheet that you're holding up, has 2 things going forward that haven't been done yet. One is the initial interdivisional meeting, and then the second is something he calls project leadership management and coordination. And if we still have the link handy, Will can drop it in the chat, because I don't think people can see what you're showing, Michelle. But now I don't want us to digress too much on this point. I think we sort of resolved to, have Tuck and Will talk about this, but I'll leave you with 1 or 2 other things. To understand what's going forward, I think we need a little bit more granularity on what that initial interdivisional meeting looked like, the timing, the cost, the budgeting. I'd like to see that specifically, because while phase 2 calls for $20,000 to $30,000 for the phase, we don't know how much of that, at least I don't know offhand, went into that first portion of phase 2, let's call it 2A, which is the pre-application statement, and how much is going forward, and how much we can expect in this fiscal year. I think those are among some of the questions we have. The last thing I'll say is, and this is from Tuck's email in September to the zoning committee, he says we should engage an environmental consultant on a short-term or hourly basis as part of the project's initial interdisciplinary meetings. So I think getting better color on that. What does it look like? How much is being budgeted, not just to Tuck, but to a potential additional consultant? I think that's what we really need to sort through, among other things. Will has dropped, for those in the Zoom, a link to the phases and the breakdown. But Michelle, I hope that answers somewhat. I don't think the document enough was sufficiently granular. Rebecca, and then Alita, and then I think we should shift over to the Arts Committee agenda. Marco's hand is down. Okay. So Rebecca, and then Alita.
I'll keep it really short. I just saw in one of his emails that he still hasn't heard back from DCP regarding the pre-application and was asking if anyone from our board has been in touch. Maybe we can, as a next step from this meeting, like the co-chairs of the zoning committee or Will or Russell could try and reach out so that you can at least take some comfort in the fact that we're really not trying to stall this at all. We're just, I voted in favor of hiring him initially, but I can't help my concerns about our responsibility as a board. So I think that might be a good next step if the co-chairs are willing, so we can at least take some, come away from this meeting with some clear action steps and not just completely delaying. I don't know if we want to ask Elizabeth if she's okay with that. She just raised her hand.
Well, let's see what Elizabeth has to say. We'll get to Elizabeth in a moment, but I do want to keep going in order, and then perhaps we can get to that Arts Committee agenda item. So we have Alita, then Marco, then Sherry, then Elizabeth. Alita, you're up.
Thank you. I just want to say and remind everyone that he's not paid in advance. He's not being given a retainer. He is paid for work done and bills submitted, so that if there are questions about what he's done in supporting documentation, there is that option. But here he like lawyers, like architects. What Billy? I see your hand.
I'm just actually asking Will to I want you to finish, and I'm going to let Will jump in. He's being very expressive, so I will let Will jump in after you finish your point. I think.
Well, if I'm going to be corrected, I'd like to be corrected before I continue to make a fool of myself.
Yes,
the most recent contract he was paid up front, and the contract before that he billed after without any sort of expectation, and he overbilled over the micro purchase agreement. The first invoice I got from him didn't have any time stamps, anything at all. And if you recall, I flagged that for you and freaked out. And that the next year we got actual timestamps of like what he did, but that was not anything. You remember it. It was laughable. And then it took us getting that actual micro purchase contract. It was supposed to have been a RFP that he didn't agree to, that he actually agreed to like submit stuff in writing of like when he would actually submit. So I don't think he was paid up front. Most recently, he was paid up front, and previously speaking, he was paid exactly to the dollar, pretty much what we had budgeted for him. Like that's a red flag. If I've ever heard one.
Really, I'm not sure how it's a red flag when he is working and can only bill a certain amount. I put in pro bono hours on mediations that I typically get paid for, even in the middle of them, because people might object or might not want to meet unless I meet for free, and that's how things go. So
but then do you follow up with them 4 times asking for payment for what you pro bono put in?
I'm not going to defend his billing practices, but I will defend his work. And I share with you some of the frustration that we felt when I was chair, but that doesn't mean that he's not competent. Let me just finish the sentence, please.
I apologize for breaking in here. And Billy and Felice are doing a good job of just trying to keep us on track. I just feel like we keep going back to this question of what we should be asking him for or not. And we've already done that. We already had that discussion last month. It came out the way it came out. We are where we are. So I don't think we need to discuss further what people here think we should be looking for from him, or should have looked for from him, or don't really need to see from him. The full board has already spoken on that issue. And so it doesn't really do us any good to rehash all of that. And I want us all to sort of focus on kind of moving forward with the guidelines that we've got from the board.
But working and asking him for bills, and now that he knows how detail oriented,
we need a work plan from him. That's what's outstanding from the resolution. That's where we're at. That's all there is to it.
Listen,
so we're going to do it. We're going to get it.
Then I will stop here.
I really want to urge us to try to stay on track, as Russell was suggesting, because we do have this whole other agenda item that is important, which, by the way, was pushed off from last month, and I do want to make sure we give it the time it deserves. So let's please, focus on, ground we've not covered if we can. So it's Marco, then Sherry, then Elizabeth, and then I don't know if Russell, if you meant to have your hand up, and then Rebecca. All right, Marco, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So what I hear is you don't want to stop, especially those people that put the motion. They don't want to stop. That's what I said. That's what I hear. And I'm going to believe what they say. So we have two parts. So we have to move forward. I think that's the chair saying. And I agree with him. So in one part, we have money, and the other part, we have the technical issues. We cannot, in the budget, ask nothing on technical. Let the zoning and development make a determination in that part. So we don't have to discuss right here that part. The only thing is we need to have, in order to release the funds, is to determine how it's gonna be and how it's gonna be paid. I think that's what we're looking for right now. We are not looking to discuss anything about if it's in compliance, non-compliance, is not clear, is unclear, you need more granular in the technical part. Let the zoning and development determine that part. If the zoning and development determine that is enough, the information, now we have to discuss the release of funds. How are we gonna do that? That is the discussion of tonight. And I will appreciate to go in that direction only. Thank you.
So if I could just jump in, I'm sorry. So as Billy mentioned up front, the full board approved a resolution requiring a work plan for moving forward. I think that's all we're asking. We're not debating whether what Tuck did in the past, whether his paperwork was good or not work. We're just asking for a brief outline of what the next steps are, where he is and what the next steps are. We understand that there's a give and take with City Planning Commission, but if we could just work, as Russell said at the beginning, that he was going to do, and we're going to work to resolve that, then I think, we can move on. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Billy, I know.
No, I agree with you completely. So let's just, if we could try to keep it somewhat brief, and then we'll close off this discussion for now. Sherry, then Elizabeth, then Rebecca, and then we're moving to the Arts Committee agenda item. Sherry.
I would like to follow up on what Russell said and what everybody else has said. We are at the point that Russell has assured us that we would getting work going forward, though I don't understand what he's going to give you. What you want, one sentence that says, I will respond to what the questions are. I think what you're asking is inappropriate at this point. And I would like us to do something tonight instead of rehashing this again at the next meeting. Based on Russell's representation, he will make sure he gets some kind of a work plan. But again, I'm not sure what that would be. And I'd like to make a resolution that this committee agrees to move forward and approve the contract. I mean, we're going round and round in circles. I don't know where else we're going to go with this. So I would like to make a resolution. I'd like somebody to second it.
Are you is one allowed to make a resolution after speaking? I think you have to do it the other way.
No.
Yes.
So I'm sorry about that, Sherry.
Can we do a resolution that undoes what the full board has done? I mean, I think that's what we're at.
No, you would need a motion to reconsider, wouldn't you, from somebody who voted priorly for it, just like we did with that other thing.
I think that's in the same meeting.
I think it's
I think Russell's right. I think that whole motion to reconsider thing is in the same meeting. I don't know that it would be all that useful to propose a resolution to the contrary, send it back to the full board, had the same discussion at full board, send it back to us.
Yeah, Sherry, I apologize for going out of order. Sherry's motion is the other motion from the last budget committee, essentially. So, again, like we had a whole vote as between those two, and this is the one that passed the board. So, you know,
Yeah.
I broke it, so I'll let you guys go back to the.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, let's hear what Elizabeth and then Rebecca have to say, and then, you know, I do think it's appropriate for us to move on. But if someone wants to raise their hand and properly propose a resolution, I suppose we can consider it. But I think I shared my view on it. Elizabeth, then Rebecca.
I just want to pipe in one statement when the question of the board responsibilities are. I think enacting this, forwarding this proposal is a major responsibility of this board. And I think protecting the livability of the Upper East Side. This is the one bit that remains, and it is in great danger, constant danger. And I think that failure to continue and continue immediately, we are not fulfilling our responsibilities as board members. We're here as a community board. We're meeting a major community need, and that is, I think, one of probably the most basic responsibility of the board. And I hope we'll bear that in mind.
Yeah, I just want to say, given my understanding where this is at, nothing that we're doing is impeding progress. That Tuck is waiting to hear from DCP, or someone's waiting to hear from DCP. So we're not standing in the way of that. And if anything, I think it kind of behooves us to try to get better clarity on, you know, do we allocate 10,000 or whatever it is now, and for what purpose, versus potentially being able to allocate to other zoning or land use related uses in the meantime. I mean, I'd like to have that understanding personally, but let me just be quiet for now. Rebecca, and then we'll go to Sherry.
So you beat me to it. I just want to ask for an answer on whether or not someone else on our side can reach out to DCP, because Tuck hasn't heard back. And I think that was a good idea about showing our willingness to keep this proposal moving forward. And I don't really see what we can do unless we hear something back. So is someone from the board going to follow up?
It's
Anthony, I think
it's not clear to me that we want to do that until we have a clearer sense of, you know, how we're going to move forward. I mean, if that is theoretically part of the remit that we would give to Tuck to do that kind of outreach and follow up, you know, we can just sort of leave it to him to do that. I think where things stand with DCP is we've submitted our, you know, pre-application, and we have not heard back from them. And, you know, in some ways that's good to the extent that we don't have somebody engaged yet to respond to the kinds of things that we might hear back. But essentially, yeah, we have not heard anything back. And I don't know that we want to necessarily kind of get things underway with them or try to prod them until we're essentially ready for what that yields. And so that gets into this whole sort of question of delay. But again, I don't want to get it, you know, we're here where we are in terms of what we need to do to move this forward, and we all know what that is, and we just have to do it.
Okay, Sherry.
I would like to make a resolution that we take a vote to decide to move forward. And let's see, if Russell will take the responsibility of making sure that he gets some sort of a work plan from Tuck. Though again, I question what it would be other than I'm going to respond to questions. But so that's my resolution, that we take action tonight to move forward.
Is that seconded? Okay, Marco seconds it. We can now have a discussion on this. Gail and then Russell.
Well, what we could consider in line with what Sherry just said is that we will move forward with allocating the $10,000 for Tuck, but it's subject to the negotiation that Russell will have in order to get, as Felice, I think, said, really a brief outline of what the next steps are with clarification, and then an estimate, although we know that it's not going to be necessarily accurate as far as the hours that are necessary. So it would seem to me that since we're all on the same page regarding wanting to move forward with the project, and we know that we have specific monies that have been allocated from Council Member Menon for a planner, that which means that if the board at large, if the Zoning and Development Committee, the Budget Committee, everyone else is not satisfied with what we get from Tuck, then that creates the delay or we just don't move forward. But I think that knowing that we're going to allocate that money subject to securing from him what we want seems as if that could be another way of just addressing this so that people have a comfort level and that Tuck has a comfort level that, you know, I'm not going to go ahead and now submit something because, you know, you guys really aren't going to move forward. I mean, I think that there's been just so many concerns. We've, you know, kind of hashed it over and over again. And that might be just one possible way of addressing this to give everybody a comfort level, because it'll be subject to getting the paperwork. Nothing will move forward without it.
So haven't we essentially already passed that resolution and it's gone to the full board and it's back to the budget committee? I was just trying to pull out the resolution, and Billy read it up front, but
I'll put in the link in the chat.
Maybe I missed it.
I think we've already agreed to that. So we just need to get, I don't think this is a complex summary of what Tuck is going to do next. But I think we just need to do that, and then we can move forward with this project.
And I think it also should be that the Zoning and Development Committee has input and reviews whatever Tuck submits and what we ask of him, because they're the ones who have the in the weeds expertise and the knowledge of what's been done up to this point in time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Next hand is. I'm sorry. Was someone speaking? Oh, next hand I see up is Russell.
Two. Sorry, if it's my turn, I'm moving to table the resolution because I don't think it's going to be constructive to send back to the full board a resolution that didn't pass. Anyway, so I don't want to sort of get too far into a substantive discussion, but I'm moving to table.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Felice seconds it, Craig and others have seconded it. Okay, so the motion to table is seconded. And remind me on the parliamentary rules, do we go?
It's automatic, we just go with vote. No,
vote,
there's no debate on it. So it's
right, okay, there's no debate, so there's a vote. Okay, let's put the hands down. Okay, motion to table, the resolution's on the floor. Raise your hand if you are voting against, so you're a no on the motion to table, or if you're abstaining, or if you're not voting for cause. Raise your digital hand, please, and then I'll call on you one by one. And actually, let me get my, actually, before we start this vote, Will, do you mind reading off who's in attendance, who committee members?
Yes, and so they're not going to be in the order of alphabetical by first name like they would be, but it's going to be okay. Elizabeth Ashby, Sherry Weiner. No, sorry, Elizabeth, I'm just reading the name, but I really liked how quick you were on that. Sherry Weiner, Marco Tamayo, Alida Camp, Gail Barron, Anthony Cohn, Billy Freeland, Felice Farber, Russell Squire, Craig Lader, John McClement, Judy Schneider, Michelle Birnbaum, and Rebecca Dangor.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we'll go take a vote. Elizabeth Ashby,
Elizabeth, no.
No.
Sherry Weiner,
No.
Thank you.
Marco Tamayo,
No.
Alita Camp,
No.
Thank you.
Gail Barron,
No.
Anthony Cohn.
No.
Thanks.
Okay, we have 14 people present and there were 6 no's. Let me give it a moment. Anyone else want to vote on this? Raise your hand, digital hand. Okay, so it passes by my quick math 8-6. The motion table passes. Okay, I think with that we move to the next agenda item. But
Michelle,
Oh,
did
I'm
you
sorry.
want to vote?
No, no.
Michelle voted it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't good. I would be worried that this wouldn't pass at the full board. That's why. But here's my question, and I don't know if this closes it out or not. It's up to you.
I think so.
I want the zoning committee to weigh in heavily as to whether or not what Tuck submits to us is adequate. Because this is what concerns me, that it's never going to be detailed enough for some people, and others might, I mean, Felice used the word brief. That's good. I look at what the phases are on here. This would be adequate for me. Obviously, it isn't adequate description enough for others. So just to say that we're going to go back and get a description, and then the presumption being that that's going to be adequate, I'd like to be sure that Russell, who is getting the information, is going, and I'm sure he will, convey to Tuck what it is that we're looking for and what constitutes adequate. And then that goes primarily to zoning. Budget can be in on it, of course, but I don't want to be going back and forth that, well, I don't think that's explanatory enough. We could be doing this for the next 20 months because this is a subjective decision. So while I would have loved to have had some kind of vote on it tonight in support of Sherry, I just don't think that the way it was worded, it was going to pass the full board, and I didn't want to take that chance. So if you can tell me that you can be in judge of the parameters, and that will get moving.
Yes.
Once he submits.
100.
Can I, to the extent that it's a question, can I sort of give a sense of what I'm planning to ask for? So basically what I think we need, I think there's 2 aspects of it. I think the first one is a description or explanation of what work is needed. And I think it needs to be a little bit more specific and more tailored than what we've gotten so far to the time frame that we're talking about. So basically just an explanation of what work he would need to do over the course of the next, essentially 8 to 12 months. So just something sort of specific about that. Doesn't have to be, super detailed, but basically what work is entailed in the course of that time frame, and not a situation where we're having to sort of go over this sort of broader document. And even on this discussion tonight, we're not necessarily sure which phase we're in and so on and so forth. I think let's just get a sort of answer of what it needs to do in the next few months. That's the first aspect of it. And then the second related thing is an estimate of the time involved. And again, with the understanding that, as we've said multiple times here, no one can predict the future. No one knows. We don't know what questions we're going to get or not. We don't know how many questions we're going to get. There's a lot of, things that we don't know. But with the information that we have, in the position that we're in the state of the project that we're at, an estimate of even a sort of range of what the hours are going to be involved in each aspect of what he's going to tell us. So that, I think, is what we're looking for. That's what I'm going to ask for.
Okay, we are going to have 2 more hands, and then we are moving to the Arts Committee agenda item, because I think we've really gone over this quite a bit tonight. Rebecca, then Marco, and then Arts. Rebecca.
I just want to add one more thing to that. I think it's we've all established that maybe we haven't been getting all of the information we have asked for that have been stipulated in the contract on time. To me, I view this as a little bit of like a course correction so that we no longer have to focus on this aspect of the proposal, if that makes sense. It's asking for more information, kind of re-clarifying our need to not get the most detailed reports of all time, but just to make sure we're getting the information we need so that people's levels of comfort no longer have to be part of this discussion, because this is our like third or fourth time talking about it. It's a waste of time. We should only care about the future of the proposal. And I think starting, you know, with a clearer expectation will kind of hopefully eliminate people's concerns that have nothing to do with the actual project that we're trying to get accomplished.
Thank you, Rebecca. Marco,
Yeah.
to close us out.
Thank you. I would like to propose a motion. This motion is exactly what Russell said. What work needs to be done and to present on the schedule. And then if somebody second, I can explain what is my opinion about that. Does anybody can second? Oh, Shari.
Sherry seconded.
Yes. So the idea is basically why we need to do that. We need to do that in zoning and development. And we have to do also probably joint meeting with the budget and zoning. So the two co-chairs be present at the meeting, but we had to discuss obviously the issues about what needs to be done. What is the expectations? Because that group, I think, or that committee, I think have good expertise planning, architectural development, and construction. So we are very well versed committee that we can have the credentials to go in that direction. And secondly, after that, yes, I think you need to have an approximately what we expected time. I think I also described very well. So that is I think that is the motion. And also, I think we have to start schedule the next meeting on the zoning and development, this issue. Thank you.
My understanding is that this is out of order because we just had a motion to table this item. Am I misunderstanding the parliamentary rule? If we just had a motion to table?
The table is the more, I'm sorry, my understanding is correct if I'm wrong. If somebody knows more than me, and I think probably yes. The issue is once it is tabled is the motion that was presented. But in this case, it's something different for that motion. And I think that is the point right here.
Russell, do you have a view on that?
I think I motioned to, I think Marco is right.
Okay.
As expressed, I move to table the motion, not the.
And Billy, I just want to flag for you that your co-chair just dropped off.
Okay. Michelle.
So I agree with everything that Marco is proposing. However, I don't think we need a resolution. I think the resolution that we passed that went to the full board basically said we're going to go forward after we get this information from Tuck, the information to our satisfaction. We have been talking about the fact that it needs to go to the budget committee. That's where it originated. That's where the project originated. So sure, the zoning and development, I'm sorry. That's where the project originated. So of course it'll go back to that committee. And to the extent that we'll still be talking about funding, it could also go to budget. I don't think they necessarily have to be joint, but they can be. But it could, you know, the information could come to zoning and development and then go to budget to say, here's what we have. What zoning and development is concerned about is what Russell has just satisfied tonight. So I agree with the sentiment, Marco, but I think it's a needless and a little bit of a worrisome complication to have yet another resolution that will go in front of a full board who is not necessarily following this issue the way everybody on this call is following this issue. And I think it's going to raise far more questions than it will answer. So that's my thought about it. If you agree, withdraw it. If you don't, then it's set forward and here it is for a consideration. But that's my concern. I want to see less confusion and resolutions about this topic as possible, because not everybody is following it the way some of us are following it, nor are they privy to the paperwork of any kind, going back to 2017 and maybe 15 in some cases. So I wouldn't complicate the issue. I think it stands to reason as set forth in the resolution that they did pass and with Russell's explanation tonight. So I hope you'll take that in the spirit in which it's intended. I just think that might be best. Thanks.
Well, maybe I'll just give Marco an opportunity if he wants to withdraw or not.
Thank you. The only thing I would like to see
No,
is,
Marco, I just want to ask if you want, no, Marco,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
the only thing before I make the decision, I would like to see if everybody raise their hands. If I see that the majority is kind of still with the resolution, I'm going to continue. If there is no majority, I'm going to withdraw right away. It's just only raise the hands. Those that
Raise the hand for what?
just
He
only
wants to see whether
continue-
people in majority
continue
support
this,
what he proposed, right, Marco?
I just want to know if we're raising the hand in favor of it or raising the hand in favor of what Michelle said.
I think in favor of Marco's motion, but if you're in favor,
Okay, fine. Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
either one. I just let everybody know. So
I'm not
everyone
seeing a
can-
lot of hands, Marco. So do you want to go ahead?
Before we do that, I had a point of information. Marco, can you repeat the resolution? I didn't hear all of it.
Well, the resolution was exactly what Russell described, which basically is what work needs to be done and a schedule of the time. That's basically Russell said. I tried to put together, unless Russell wanted to add something, that's perfectly fine. And the point is, the only thing I would like to see, right now, raising hands, if I find that there is a support of this resolution, then I'm not going to withdraw. But if there is,
It's like a quick straw poll. So just raise your physical hand if you would vote for Marco's resolution. If you can't,
yes,
it's a straw poll.
We have two, only two.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw my resolution. Simple.
Okay, thank you, Marco. It's been withdrawn, and I see no other hands up. So we're going to move at long last to the Arts Committee agenda item. And I say at long last because Alita very generously agreed last month to push it back to this month. So thank you, Alita, for that. And thank you to the Arts Committee. I don't see Felice here, who's going to lead this discussion. So but there's not much to it. I think I'll just turn it over to you, Alita, to maybe describe, or before I do that real quickly. So the Arts Committee came to us, I can't remember now how many months ago it was, but basically seeking funding for a combination of advertising in local newspapers for the, what is it, 3 or 4 art fairs that we do every year as a community board. The last one was incredibly successful, but also for tables and easels and other supplies and materials. So, at the time that we discussed it as a committee, and the amount that was presented to us was a little bit steep, particularly the advertising budget. So we were hoping that the Arts Committee would come back to us with an updated proposal. So I think that's a fair characterization. Alita, do you want to provide an update?
I do, and thank you. We're dropping that whole approach of asking for that kind of money because we did have a very successful art show. We were able to get an article placed, thank you, Peggy, in Eastside Patch, which does a lot more than advertising might. We had the good services and very effective social media knowledge of our public member who is involved in the art world and was able to reach out to quite a lot of artists and member of the public. We did a more aggressive posting campaign, including on the day. So I think we could, at least for this year, bypass promotion and see how it works. The same thing with music. We had so many artists this time that we did not feel a need to have the kind of music that we had the last time. However, I would like to ask for some funding for music for in the future, because we're talking to the Origin Theater Company, whose creative director, you people on the board for a while may remember Mick Malamphy. He, excuse me, is now creative director of the Origin Theater Company, whose mission is to to bring European plays to New York, I think primarily Irish. Last fall, we had a play reading. This year, we're talking about doing something close to Valentine's Day, and there's actually a very, I think, funny project out there that he has. So I think right now it would be nice to have some music if we need it for that kind of thing. But primarily, we're asking for funding for 2 salsa lessons with accompanying music for people to engage in a kind of performing arts rather than purely visual arts. Public art is essential, not only for quality of life, but for improving perspective, bringing new perspective, building community. That's why the city puts a lot of money into public art. It's why governments all over the world, the federal government supports the Smithsonian, the state supports all kinds of museums. Public art is important to the public. There was an article in the New York Times even about, excuse me, about art in Ukraine during this war and what it means to its population. So public art is important to support artists. They're small businesses too. It's important for the community. And what it does is bring people to the community board who might not have had any kind of interest and still might not in the workings of the government and in all of the issues that we see all the time, other than to complain about it. They may not even be aware that community boards exist. So I think, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we had about 45 to 50 people sign up for the board's email list. I know because I transcribed it into legible material for Will. And that's quite a lot of people. So on all of those levels, public art and what we're doing is important. And as I mentioned, we're not just using visual arts, but we're also exposing people to performing arts through our dance, through the reading that we had. Excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my throat. And I think it's a little frog. And we have the support of both Borough President Mark Levine, who came to this art show and the previous one, and State Senator Jose Serrano, who brought his entire family and whose son would like to show at our next art show. So we have a lot of support, and I think it's important. So the funding that we're asking for is to enhance our efforts to expose and introduce the public to the arts and to enhance the productions that we are having. A lot of what we're doing does not require funding. I'm meeting with JREC in the next couple of weeks to talk about a schedule for their students to perform. They did at our first 2 art shows. They weren't able to in the fall because they were double booked, but they have music, they have musical theater, they have a choir. So to work out a schedule for our June art show. So all of that is really to enhance quality of life and exposure and way of thinking and community building on the Upper East Side. And I hope that it has not only the support of the Arts Committee, but the support of the full board as well. I should mention, as I have, that Russell has been very supportive. Thank you, Russell, and has come to our art shows, helped with our art shows, and spent quite a lot of the time. And the people on the Arts Committee work hard. We were at the art show at 9 o'clock to set up and mark out spaces, and we didn't leave until the artists left well after 4. So it's a big time commitment, and I think we are making a difference to the community. I also want to mention, with respect to the easels, that we had provided easels when we had about 30 artists, but since we had over 60 the last time, we asked all of them to bring their own display materials, whether it was a blanket on the ground or an easel or a table, and they did. And thanks to the Madison bid, they sent over a table for the use of the community board at these art shows. So as I said at the last full board meeting, it takes a village, and I hope part of that village is the budget committee's approval. Thank you.
And Alita, you may have left out the most important part. Was there a specific dollar figure that you are requesting?
Oh, yes, thank you. So in terms of the salsa lessons, that would be $1,400. In terms of, I guess it's a little high for petty cash, but it's the function of petty cash, about $300 for miscellaneous expenses. And also, I guess I'd like to ask for a reserve of $1,500 for music if it's necessary to support a kind of program. And I just want to mention that not only did we have music at the art shows, but when we had the reading from Origin Theater, They paid for it. I don't know what is true going forward, but they had an Irish musician. There was an Irish play, and that I think enhanced the performance and again exposed, or that's probably not the right word, but introduced the public to maybe a different form of music. So there we have it. Thank you for reminding me, Billy.
Thank you, Alita. Okay, Rebecca, and then
Felice
Russell.
is back too, I see.
I am back. Sorry about that. I was having technical difficulties. So Billy, thanks for taking over. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks. So so you're looking for $3,200, is that it? Or $1,400 upfront, plus $1,500 in reserve and $300 for a variety of whatever petty cash things that you'll need, which will then be documented.
I guess it's a funding thing. So if we are able to set up, and we did try the salsa lesson for the spring, then that would be a time to expend the funds. It's only on an as needed basis, but to have the money there if it's something that we would need specifically. Yes.
Rebecca?
I just have a couple of questions. The first you just answered about the amount. The second is, since we already voted on the budget for this fiscal year, I guess we would have to vote on an amended one. And I was wondering if maybe we could pull that out and see where we are and how much funding we can actually afford to move around. And then my final thought is, just because I know you guys have done incredible work and it's highly praised by our local electeds, I was wondering if we wanted to also pursue maybe getting funding from a council member or Mark Levine for this very issue, just because our budget is always so tight, and I want us to think about every possible way we could continue to supporting this without, not spending funds on something else.
And I understand, and it's already been done. Last year, we made a request of both council members, Keith Powers and Julie Menon, for discretionary funding. I've spoken to the borough president's office, and there is no funding available through them for something like this. And when Senator Serrano came and was so excited, and he said, "How can I help?" the first words out of my mouth were discretionary funding. So we've already made that request to his office as well. So I don't know. I don't think anything came from the council members. We were kind of last minute, but we should certainly put that in for the next fiscal year. But you're absolutely right, Rebecca. Why take from the community board's tight budget when we could get money from the city or the state?
Yeah, so I think maybe just we should look at what we voted on and approved and see where we are and how we can, if the committee wants to approve the specific funding request or a modified version, I think we need to have the numbers in front of us.
Okay, and Will, I think we have the $5,000 of discretionary funds from the council member from council member, I think Keith Powers, that could be used on this.
So correct. So without amending the budget that was already passed, because the budget was approved before the council has to vote on their Schedule C, which is their discretionary grants, we did not incorporate that into our previously voted on fiscal year 23 budget. So right now, we do have those two council discretionary grants, the $5,000 from Keith Powers that is general funding, and the $10,000 that we referenced from Julie Menon's office. So you could pull from that $5,000 and still leave the 10 over there for Tuck, as we've all talked about, without needing to amend any budget from our actual line items that you guys voted on.
I don't want to take funding away from an urban planner, from Tuck in particular, having participated, I think, somewhat passionately in the last discussion about the 210 height limit and the necessity. And without reopening that, I don't want to be responsible for taking money from that. So I guess, short, I don't really know how to proceed, because without, and Rebecca's hand is up, maybe there's a compromise with respect to the music or some aspect of it, at least for this fiscal year. And we'll put in early requests to the council members for discretionary funding. And maybe there's a way that they could earmark some of it for the arts committee. But again, there are a lot of issues that we're faced with and a lot of funding needs. Can I call on Rebecca since she had her hand up, or do you want to do it differently, Billy? I don't know if she's responsive to that. Oh, but she's
No, absolutely.
committee.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, no, I think we need to all come to a clearer understanding of where the funds are coming from, because, right, we haven't fully allocated funds. I know the discussion has been for the 10,000 for Tuck, which we can only use for that type of thing. But I think that's, if we're going to vote on spending the additional 5,000, right, part of it on the arts committee, it means we can't spend that on Tuck if it's needed. So I just think if we had all the numbers kind of in front of us, like maybe the budget we voted on in May, I think it was, the discretionary grant, and the understanding that the board is hoping to continue to fund Tuck, even though the discussions were just 10,000, I just don't have I have a feeling it would be more, just based on what I've seen before, which is, I think, kind of why we wanted to have more detailed information, because we do have an additional 5,000 to spend that isn't already allocated for in our budget. So I think
sorry. I think we'll just put the budget in the chat. I think, and we'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think because of the funding that we allocated for staff raises in May, I think it was, there's little flexibility, and we're trying to be fully staffed. There's little flexibility remaining in the budget. So I think the funding that we have is really that $5,000 discretionary grant. But Will, if you want to clarify.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pop up on the screen for everybody to see this document. I'm sorry, I have to find it. Here we go. So this is actually just a fun learning lesson for everybody. The New York City Council, whenever they pass their budget, they actually have a budget page on their website. You can always go there and you can learn more about the New York City budget. I highly recommend it, council.nyc.gov. So each of the expense funding items that we were funded for last year, you can find them here with the description of funds that they go to. So these came from Councilmember Julie Menon to fund an urban planner. This was from Councilmember Keith Powers. Funding will provide community outreach, sounds a lot like an arts committee to me, between the board and its constituents, and share information regarding government services. That really sounds a lot like what you guys are talking about. So, oh, no, that's the wrong document. Hang on here. Here, should be able to see, this is the budget that we passed at the end of the fiscal year. You'll notice this is our personnel budget. Here is our other than personnel budget. That accounts for about $17,000 at the end of the year. That is not a whole lot. And pulling from there, a lot of things you can't actually pull from, or our website would go down, or our phones would stop ringing. So you can't pull a whole lot from our other than personnel services budget, but you can easily pull from here. And it does sound like Councilmember Powers may have been thoughtful in the way that he framed his discretionary grant.
But to your point, Alita, if we needed more money for Tuck, those are the two discretionary funds that we have. The $10,000 that would go towards urban planning, and this additional $5,000 discretionary grant.
Okay, well, that's a tough thing, but again, I guess we'll put in more requests for discretionary funding. And we will hope that we'll get some from the state senator as well. And we also have, I guess, Liz Kruger, although Serrano is the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee in the state Senate. So I think that helps. He has a particular passion for the arts. And I guess we'll forego music. The fiscal year ends in another 7.5 months, and see what we could come up with for the following year. I think it would be good for the community to have the dancing, and I'll talk to the members of the Arts Committee about tailoring that request as well. The other petty cash quote expenses are for things like balloons, which are helpful for luring the public in if we don't have opportunities to to print. We were going to treat students from JRAC to ice cream last year. It's probably somewhere around $100. They perform for free and they work hard for an hour or two or so. So things like that. But anyway, that's I guess what I could say is, if you're not amending the budget, and of course I haven't conferred with members of the Arts Committee on this, but my thinking right now off the top is that if you're not adjusting the budget for the community board, is to talk about a little bit less and have the money there. And if we don't need it, then we don't need it. And if everything goes ahead with Tuck, then we could revisit everything without, I don't want anything, of course, to be at the expense of a full Arts Committee program, but maybe there are ways to work around it for this fiscal year, with the understanding that that it is not a limitation of what we might be able to request in the future, depending on what comes through any level of government, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Alita. Next up is Russell and then Gail.
Thank you. So I just want to thank Lita for her acknowledgement. Just note the Arts Committee really does put in a lot of work to keep these events as successful as they've been. Done a very, very good job. And the attendance that we've had at the art shows, I think, really speaks to not only the great job that the committee has done, but also really the value that this has. I think it's enormously valuable just in terms of enrichment in the community. It's a very pleasant thing that the neighborhood can partake in. And also it is something that draws attention to the community board and the work that we do. We've had a lot of people come over to our community board table and learn more about our work and getting involved because of their attendance at the art show. So I think it's a very, very positive thing for us to be able to do. I will also say that you know, I think part of the genesis of this was a recognition of how difficult the pandemic was for the arts community. And what we have done with these art shows is provide artists with a forum to get their work out and actually sell some work, which I think is helpful to them. And also when we've paid performers, you know, that's also, I think, an important thing for us to be doing. And I'll just add, you know, I think all too often performers are asked to perform for free or to sort of perform for recognition. But the fact of the matter is, you know, that is their profession. That is what they do to pay their rent and put food on the table. And I think it's important for us to set a good example in actually paying folks for their performances when they do that. So just getting to the sort of budget component of this, I'll just note, as Alita mentioned, we did definitely include the Arts Committee and art shows in our request to our council members. And so I think, as Will said, it is very much within the scope of the funding that we got from council member Powers to spend money on this. Just in terms of timing, you know, I've had conversations with Senator Serrano's office, and then we spoke to the senator at the art show. I think, you know, we won't get any money until next year. I think we would probably, if we were able to get money from the state, I think we would know that in the spring. And we find out, you know, the money basically like at the end of April or in May, something along those lines. And money from the council comes in June. So I think it's very possible that we'll have additional money from those sources. And if we do, we can sort of figure out how to spend it. But we won't know that until then. So we will certainly pursue every avenue to get that. In the meantime, right now we have what we have. So I support this. I think the request is very reasonable. I think it's something that we should allocate.
Thank you, Russell. Gail, and then Michelle.
I certainly agree with Russell and Alita, not only because I'm a member of the Arts Committee, but looking at when we first began because of the pandemic and wanting to really get to the artist and support them. So I look at it as being more than just the arts committee, but I think it is also a small business committee initiative because artists are small businesses. And they were so appreciative and excited, and everybody wanted to know when the next show was taking place. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sure Will can respond to them. Will, I know that when Alita was chair, and I'm not sure, Russell, if under your tenure, for 3 years toward the end of the fiscal year, like in June, we always ended up with money that was left over and had to figure out, would we pre-purchase certain items? How are we going to spend that money? Because it's lose it or use it at the end of the fiscal year. If you haven't spent it all, then it goes back to the city. So I think that it would be good to get kind of a handle and have a feeling as to whether or not we have historically continued to have some money left toward year end, because then we can track as you look at your budget. And if there are those dollars, that might easily cover the cost of the what the arts committee is requesting. The other thing is, I don't know how long Zach's position was empty, but even if it's 2 or 3 weeks, then if you look at the personnel services budget, it might be possible that there's some money that would have been left there, even though the position's been filled. So that's another area where we can start to kind of take a look, and it doesn't require amending the existing budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Michelle and then Marco.
Did you want me to respond to that, or?
Oh, yeah, if you can.
Sorry, Gail, what were you saying?
It would be good since you're the keeper of the budget. And
Yeah.
You know.
The difference between this year and the last couple of years is the hiring freeze that we were under during, effective basically March 2020. If you recall, March 2020, we were actually in the process of hiring 2 new people.
Right.
We had thought we found one person, and we had made a conscious decision to leave open the other position for searching for a different candidate. Ultimately, we were so that fiscal year we had 1.5 person on staff, and supplementing through Beta NYC. And then the next fiscal year, we were still under a hiring freeze. So we were actually only ever able to staff up fully at the beginning of last fiscal year. And then, obviously we had a couple people leave during that time, Max, if you recall, and it took us a little longer to hire his replacement, or to actually really not hire his replacement, but shuffle the people around. If you recall, that took a little while. So this is the first year, hopefully, that we will not have a large period of time where we have a vacant position. And actually where we did not have, going into the fiscal year, a surplus in our personnel services budget. Our personnel service budget was our personnel service budget. Used to their even all 4 staff members didn't allocate out our personnel service budget. So for that, thank you. You guys are all great. We love you for giving us those raises. But so this is the first. Yeah, this is the first year that we would be full up. And so assuming, when we do hire Zach's replacement in the next, hopefully weeks, not months, we would have a couple of $1,000s left over. Yeah.
So that's where, if we can take that money and put that toward the arts committee request, then that handles the problem of, because I think going back and amending the budget, and were we to have to amend it for a planner or something, you don't want to amend it once and then have to go back and amend it again. So I think that would be a wise way to allocate those funds.
Yeah, I think in the next few weeks, we'll hopefully vote on hiring Zachary's replacement. I have a stack of resume literally sitting right here. And so I hope that we, by that time, would then be able to turn to OMB and say, like, okay, now how much time has elapsed? What does that equate to in a dollar figure? And that's when I would be able to tell you really sort of like what budget we gained out of, this short time period where we've been understaffed. But you can assume a couple of $1,000s.
But I think that would really help the Arts Committee a lot. So that would be great if the Budget Committee agrees. Thank you.
Okay, I think I was unmuted.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah, okay, thank you. I have a little bit of a different point of view. I'm not sure, and I've done a lot of shows and I'm in the art business. I'm not sure that this is the kind of thing that the community board should be doing, recognizing, of course, outreach is, and anything that makes the community happy is part of our job. But this is a very specific thing that requires funds the way it's formulated. And I know what hard work this is to put this together. I applaud the committee. This is no easy task, and they're doing events a few times a year. It is very hard. I'm not demeaning or diminishing that in any way, believe me. But it was my understanding in our past discussions, at this discussion, we only discussed $10,000 for for TUC. And then we talked about in the last meeting, the other 5,000 that came from Keith that we were planning to put towards supporting TUC. And then we said that $4,999 could come from the community board budget because that would leave us under 20,000, which is what is required to go forth with the project as it's listed, in this way. So in my mind, I'm counting on that money for TUC, and I don't see a rationale for taking any of those funds for the Arts Committee. I think, as I say, I question whether or not doing this on such a grand scale is our purview anyway. But let's say it is, and let's say the majority feel that it is. I think that the funding should come from completely outside. I think maybe you could go to the bids, to the block associations and say, look, sponsor this with us and, give us this amount of money for this. You provide the balloons. Maybe go to the balloon store and say, can you please send us the balloons? I don't think it's really our place to be hiring musicians. And I know that we all feel strongly that people in the arts should be well paid, but it is advertising for them. And we're not in the position of hiring musicians. So, and also the other thing I'm concerned about that I haven't heard addressed, and maybe we should, is insurance. If we are basically planning block events, much like Clearview sponsors a Third Avenue fair, the overriding entity should have some kind of insurance. You're calling, I wonder what our liability is. You're calling crowds of people to a public space. If somebody gets hurt, whatever, not to be calling about doomsday and being, all doom and gloom. But I think you have to be mindful of that, of what kind of legal responsibility do we have there. I don't really think it's our job, but if you think that it is, I think that the funding should come from outside the community board. I don't think we should be funding it. And also, I think that Keith giving us $5,000 is really a pittance. I don't know, I mean, why, $5,000? I think that Keith should certainly step up for more than that. And I don't think he necessarily has to designate what it's for, but it's for our use. It could be for our planner, but $5,000 doesn't seem significant enough. And also, if you can answer the question as to why we didn't discuss the additional 5,000 from Keith and the 4,999 tonight in terms of what we had discussed in the past for the planner. So from my point of view, if there was a resolution to allocate money specifically to the Arts Committee, I would be opposed to it. But I have no objection. I'd like insurance to be looked into, and I have no objection to them looking for sponsors and finding others to donate, maybe local stores. You want to give ice cream to the JREC kids, maybe somebody could donate the ice cream. You want to, whatever. But you get my drift. With all of our expenses and our very, very important projects that we've been working on for years and years and years, I think this is not a great use of the funds that we have at this moment. And even if a few thousand would open up, as per Will's comments, I'd like to see that few thousand be put towards the planner. And nobody has said anything about George Janes. Isn't he like on our payroll one way or another, or gets paid project by project, and at some point demands funds, which we may need to have. So I think we have to take all that into consideration. So thanks for listening.
So if I could answer a couple of your questions, Michelle. One, I think we'll put the issue about the insurance question in the chat, or maybe that's
I just sent that to you. I was just trying to tell you I knew the answer to that question.
Will knows the answer, which is the City of New York does not maintain insurance, and the City Law Department will represent us.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed that.
The city's law department will represent us if there's an issue. Hopefully there would not be, but we do not need additional insurance.
Oh, okay. They will represent us.
They will.
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Good to know. That's good.
In terms of George Janes, I believe he's been prepaid for the year, so there's no need for additional funding for him for that. It's taken care of through this fiscal year. And we talk about micro purchase as being 19,999. It's 20,000. It's not, we're not trying, it's that it's 20,000 or 25,000 are the limits. So we're not trying to get just under 20,000. But to your point about the additional funding, because we are fully staffed or soon to be fully staffed, we don't have the extra $5,000 in our budget to put towards a planner. So the only additional funding we have is the 10,000 from Julie, the 5,000 from Keith, and then a question about whether or not there's a few $1,000 gap in the time between personnel. So I just wanted to clarify those issues.
Oh, good. That's very helpful. Thank you. But we need that money. It seems to me that money is spoken for.
Can I jump in, Felice, please? I do not want to take money away from Tuck. I believe passionately, consistently, and committedly to working for that 210 height limit and the special districts. But to have the support of the community board on these kinds of arts related initiatives and programs, I think would be very helpful. Not a financial support, but just a support. So I'll stop there. Thank you. And I do appreciate, I think speaking for the Arts Committee, the work, and when people from the community board do come either to exhibit or to come and look, and sometimes even to buy something. And we have had support from some community organizations too. So I think community boards are multi-layered, and they have many tentacles, like an octopus, which I just found out has brains in its tentacles, which is fascinating. But we, not to say anything about the intellect of the community board, but we could do a lot of things at once. And I think that the Arts Committee does, as Russell say, enrich the community, and I think enrich the board as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. So next is Marco, and then Rebecca, and just something to think about. I wonder if in the limited reduction in the funding request, we want to consider the few $100s that Alita requested for those miscellaneous items, balloons, ice cream, whatever. Marco?
Thank you. I would like to congratulate the committee for working very hard, and I think they're doing a wonderful job. However, arts in our community, I think probably we are the luckiest one to have a lot of cultural activities in our community. We have the Mile Museum Avenue, We have the Guggenheim Museum. We have the Met with 1 million of archaeological pieces. We have inside of the Central Park a beautiful and nice renovated place for a theater that they can go the community. We approved the gallery project on 89th Street. So everywhere in our community is full of arts. And we are lucky to have, I'm very happy to have. However, now this committee, they can operate without any financing for our part. Why? Because if they asking from $15,000, $1,400 is 9%. If they asking $24,000, I hear the settle to, or more, that means it's 16% what we have available. For an activity, if we compare with the 210 and the large amount of money that we need for that, I think it's wrong to go in that direction anymore. And any money should be saved directly for the planner. Why? Because it's not cheap. And we know that. And you hear the numbers. Any dollar counts in this case. The community board is not a rich person that we can say, okay, we can get the money. No. On the contrary, I think one of the discussions of the last items that we discussed is exactly money. And we don't have money to put in an area that by itself our community is full served. And the only thing is, if you want to keep doing that, I think that I congratulate, I support, and you can look for all the avenues of money. And there is nothing wrong. But to take any money in other direction that is not the 210 is wrong. Thank you.
Marco, I've already said that I don't want to take any funding from TAC. So I think your point is, and everyone else's point is well taken. It's an important project. It's something the community supports and the board has supported on more than one occasion, as was pointed out earlier. It's not something that I want to do and intend on doing. So it would
Just
be
from city,
money beyond that.
just from like a city budget discussion standpoint, you discuss what's allocated, and what is allocated to Tuck right now is zero. So nothing is being taken away from anything or defunded away from anything, because nothing is funded currently. So I just want to make sure everybody's using the right language here. That like, no, that's just, that is actually when discussing the city budget, either things are allocated or they're not, and they're funded or they're not. And if you're defunding something, that means you're taking something that had a baseline, had a year in, year out, like that is on the list, and you're removing it away. Technically speaking, you could fire me and you could fire the rest of the staff, and that is all funding for whatever thing you want to do. Nothing is funded for Tuck right now.
No, and I understand that, Will, and appreciate the interest in using the correct language. As a lawyer, I know how important that is. But the idea is that we've been talking about having money for Tuck for close to $20,000, and that's money that should still be there, assuming that all of the prerequisites are met in terms of paying him. So while the language may be wrong, the intent is that if what's done satisfies the zoning and development committee and this committee, the budget committee, then he should be paid that. And to ask for funding out of, since we are really tight, out of that sum of money for the arts committee, I am not really comfortable with that at this point. So language may not be correct, but the concept is there.
Thank you, Alita. Next up is Rebecca and then Russell.
I was almost going to make a motion, but I actually want to say what I was planning on saying before, which is, so historically we've always reallocated funds in the summer meeting. The only concern I have is you mentioned a June event, right? And so I think the earliest we could do it is like, we could have the meeting would be the last 2 weeks of May, and that's kind of very stressful if you're trying to plan an event. That being said, and it feels so strange to say this because this is the first time my entire household pretty much has COVID. COVID is not going to be hopefully going to be our big concern in reallocating funds. In the past few years, we've been trying to get the technology we need to continue Zoom meetings or et cetera. Hopefully that's not going to be the focus of spending that excess funds this year. So we could theoretically, right, anticipate on spending what we have left over to support the arts committee. I don't know how tight that's going to be if your big event is in June. And normally, like historically, that internal budget committee meeting has always taken place in June. It was just this past year that it took place at the end of May. So that's the only thing I think we should think about, because I don't want to. It's just that's very tight to rely on excess funds if we're voting on it 2 weeks before your event.
Can I just ask a question aside from all of this? Did we ask, was there a resolution with language asking the city to pay for any of the Zoom related expenses in connection with?
Yes. So when we voted on the internal budget last year, in the May meeting, I proposed a resolution which passed unanimously in new business, which is that we were requesting, or maybe it was actually with the internal budget, I forget, but it was requesting that the borough president's office, who pays for our Zoom, which is the only way we're able to kind of do what we do, it was dependent on their continued support, because otherwise I was only going to vote on spending money to try and keep our meetings running. But that might be actually the only thing we have to consider if Mark Levine is going to cut our Zoom access and we want to be able to continue to live stream all of our committee meetings and not just the full board. Remember, before COVID, land use was not live streamed on YouTube. So that is the only other thing potentially that I could see us wanting to spend money on. But I think, Will, you might know more. I think Mark has been very receptive to continuing to support our Zoom access, because we save a lot of money if we all do it together as all the community boards. So
yes, he's been very supportive of it, and I don't believe that he intends to cut that budget, especially while all the community boards are still using it. Obviously, that's a Mark Levine question, not a Will Barbill question.
And maybe we
I think Russell had wanted to clarify something on that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think we should clarify on that as well, because we did spend money on owl cameras specifically so that they could help us continue to use the Zoom.
So I have my hand raised on something else, but on the question of the Zoom account, I actually brought this up at the last borough board meeting. We were told is that the borough president's office is going to continue to pay for our Zoom account. So we're set for it.
Thank you, Russell.
Separate from that answering that question, I was going to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, my motion is to allocate the requested funds, although I guess I'm not entirely clear on whether there's still a request pending or if we have just to wait. I guess I don't know what the current ask is in light of the concerns around talk or what have you. So pending clarification on that, my motion is to.
So can I just answer Russell's question and thank you. So if we're in terms of being very fiscally conservative for this fiscal year, I'd like to say $700 for salsa, because we talked about doing that before the end of the fiscal year. And we do need, I have gone out of pocket and spent money on tape to put up signs, for instance, that I'm hoping to get reimbursed from. So there are some things that that we asked for Staples, that have been bought at Staples or CVS or Target, that are, as I'm sure you all know, not really willing to fork over in kind. There's also, to me, in my head, an issue if companies come before the community board of asking them even for in-kind things, but that's a conversation to be had with Russell. So I guess I would say maybe, and we'll forego again the music, but I'm concerned about anything relating to talk. So if we asked for somewhere $800 to $900, I'm hoping that would be available from some source other than money that would be used to pay for talk.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
thank you,
I thought that-
Alita.
Is
Go
the
ahead, Russell.
salsa, isn't the, I guess there's a point of information. I mean, is the salsa lesson, I thought the lesson cost $1,400.
It will for two, but so if we.
Oh, that's
turn-
for two.
Right. If we
Got it.
turn-
Okay. All right.
one.
So let me, I'm going to make my motion to allocate the, what was it? $1,000? It's 700 for salsa plus 300 petty cash.
Let's say 900 for the end of the
900. Okay.
fiscal
So
year because
that's my motion. And if it's seconded, I'll speak to it.
I'll second it if I can do that.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, look, I've already spoken about why I think this is something we should do. I guess, you know, I'm technically speaking to the motion, but my understanding of where we are budgetarily is that the money that we have available for, essentially that we don't have money as of yet. You know, we don't know what money we're going to have left over or not over the course of the fiscal year and at the end of the fiscal year. But as it stands now, we really don't have money in our sort of community board budget, independent of money that we've gotten from the council members for either Tuck or the Arts Committee, and that essentially both of these requests have to be funded from the council member allocations. And so the money for Tuck, you know, would be, I think, $10,000 from, you know, Julie, because that's money that's only for a planner. Then you've got 5,000 that's for planning or for other purposes, which we could use for Arts Committee things, or which we could spend on Tuck. So I just want to, you know, I hope people will vote for the resolution, but you know, I want to be clear with everybody, I think, on where we stand budgetarily and where this money that we're talking about is coming from. That the $900, I think, would effectively be coming out of $5,000 that we're getting from Keith. So that still leaves a full $10,000 of money from Julie for Tuck, and theoretically, if we were going to do more than that, could pull sort of the 4,100 that remains from Keith. Although the other thing that I'll observe is that the resolution, both resolutions that passed the full, both resolutions that kind of went to the full board last month talked about $10,000. So my impression was that we had sort of landed on the idea of only doing $10,000 from Julie. But be that as it may, you know, that's where the money is coming from. Money that we're talking about, both these items, comes out of that 15,000. This 900 is coming out of that 5,000 of that. And I just want to be clear with everybody that's what we're talking about. I still think we should do it, but that's where we are.
And can I just ask clarification? Sorry, Alita. So, Will, in response to Gail's question before, you indicated that we did have a little bit of money in the time period from for Zach, right? So $900 would not be unreasonable from there, would it?
No, and you know, we also have a general supplies budget that is, you know, a few $1,000s as well. So it's very feasibly possible to, you know, buy less paper and all that other stuff.
I don't want to do anything to disrupt the board in any way. So if the resolution passes here and at the full board, is it possible that depending on what is done by Tuck and what the committee and the zoning and development committee approve, that money could then be put back into the budget and the arts committee really trimmed for this year with the hopes that next year we'll be able to actually have some other kinds of funding to work with, because I actually think Michelle is right. And Keith was a little less than generous with the community board, and hoping that we'll be able to expand what we're trying to do. Some of the programs that we have are at no cost. We're planning a craft show with donations to a hospital, which I'm trying to work out, and the program with Mick and the to the extent possible, again, the art show minus those little petty cash kinds of things. So I guess it's a point of information to do that.
Okay, in that case, so it sounds, let me make 2 points. First, I just want to say with regard to the money from Keith, I mean, these are amounts that are essentially consistent with what we've got in the course of many years. So I think we've historically gotten $5,000 from Council District 4 and $10,000 from Council District 5. And I think the reason for the disparity is that Community Board 8, Community District 8, is a much larger portion of Council District 5 than it is of Council District 4. So I just want to make sure we're all. It sounds to me like actually the $900 that I'm talking about here in this resolution doesn't necessarily need to come actually out of that $5,000. It sort of may need to, or it may not. So what I would say is, let's not specify that at this time for purposes of the resolution. We can be a little bit flexible. We can use it where we need to. And in fact, even if we're talking about the 200, you know, maybe some portion of that would actually be paid for in supplies budget if you know, we have the leeway there or whatever. So let's not sort of specify. And maybe the 900 won't be coming out of that 5,000. But again, we don't need to specify that, and that's sort of positive news, and just all the more reason to support this motion.
Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's a friendly amendment to Russell's resolution that covers this. We can say that we can reframe the resolution if it's accepted to prioritize being able to fund at least $900 for the arts committee, provided that. So we do not need those funds. We can have a stipulation that if we need to pay Tuck that amount, that can take priority. And secondly, I mean, I don't think we have to worry about tape and, you know, posting flyers, because our community board budget has to allocate funds for notice. And I think any event, including an arts committee art show or something like that, counts as something that we should take responsibility of, you know, giving public notice. So I don't think that has to be a concern. So I think we can, if Russell agrees, we can have a stipulation that gives us a little wiggle room in case we need to spend some of that money on Tuck, and maybe we will, maybe we won't have 900 in our normal budget for this. So I think,
yeah, I mean, I think I want us to have maximum flexibility. So I think the question is basically, is it better to sort of specify that to get that, or is it better to just not?
Well, I think if
when
we say we're going to fund $900, we're going to have to fund $900. So I think we can provide language that works both ways, that says we're going to prioritize funding this venture, but also keeping in mind that we have not come to a decision on, and I think this is a big reason why some people wanted to get clearer numbers from Tuck, right? Is we wanted to make sure we had the money.
Here's what I would say, which is, I think there are scenarios under which we would prefer to spend this money out of the straight community board budget and not from the council funds. And I think there are scenarios under which we would prefer to spend the money out of the council funds and not from the community board budget, separate and apart from what money is available. So, for example, obviously, if we feel like we want to allocate $15,000 to Tuck, then we want to spend the money out of the board budget. If we're sort of getting to the end of the year and, you know, it turns out we haven't spent the $5,000 of the money from Keith on Tuck, and we still have that money available, and we're sort of getting to the end of the year and figuring out where our money is going to go. I mean, the money from Keith is more flexible than the money from Julie, but there are still some limitations on it that don't exist for our board. Right? So, for example, if we wanted to pre-buy equipment with leftover money, that's stuff we can do. That's something we can do out of the community board budget. That's not something that we can use the money from Keith on because of the way it's phrased. I mean, we talked about outreach, which I think encompasses a number of different kinds of things, including the art committee. You know, whether it includes, you can certainly conceive of things that we might want to spend money on that it might not encompass, although it might. So, so again, I mean, my inclination is not to specify what, just to leave it as, I want to be as flexible as possible. So that's how I think we ought to just, I don't know what the best way is to phrase it, whether it's better just to sort of
I think
specify or just to, or if there's something we can come up with to do it. But I don't want to say definitively that we're going to definitely spend it out of the board budget first, because I think it may be that we don't want to do that. I mean, we would want to do that if we want to spend it. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think my friendly amendment was more just trying to cover all the bases in case we needed to spend those funds for a different purpose. And I think there's a way to also show support for the art committee without 110% guaranteeing that we'll be able to fund every aspect. I think we
Well, look, what if we, yeah, okay. I mean, what do you think about language like this? I mean, if we basically just express our intent of essentially maximum flexibility in light of how the budgetary situation develops, that's going to maximize our ability both to pay for a planner and to pay for outreach activities and to cover the other priorities of the board. And I think that, you know, something along those lines that's going to give us essentially the ability to kind of allocate it the way that most makes sense as the year progresses.
Yeah,
I mean, is that...
no, I think that makes sense. Just because, again, like, we're not going to know until so close to the June event whether or not we're going to have any money in our internal budget to spend. So we have to like word it in a way that gives us wiggle room.
Okay, so yeah, I would basically accept a friendly amendment to that effect to just express that sort of flexibility.
Okay, so I think we have the amendment to spend $900 on or the proposal motion to spend $900 for parks for arts committee events, providing maximum flexibility in the source of that funding. If you want to talk to that motion, Marco, and then Judy.
Thank you. I'm going to say to Will, you're right. Words matter. And my point is, I think when you were represented in East 79th Street Association, you used to come every single month prior to the year 17. And the debate of the community was strongly in favor of 210. And we put a lot of pressure to all the to Dan Garoni, and we put pressure to Ben Kellos. And they finally, after we pushing them, and they said it's okay. And then we find out that he also was willing to give the money, some money. But you know what? We were discussing with Betty, and then we saying, well, we have the money, and then we find out in the way that was described in the budget, and we have been discussing with Betty what's going on. It should be specifically for this planner for this project, and then we said it's okay. Now I understand in the way that many people interpret the words that they said over there. That doesn't mean exactly what was the intention and what was the spirit of that money that was granted for this project. So now I learned something else in my life, that we have to be very, very careful when we say something. I think I have many attorneys in this community board that they know very well how to manipulate very well the words and their benefits. And that's we have to be very careful. It's just only a comment that I think is next time I have to be extremely careful that the words has to be properly established so there is no confusion in the future. And again, I'm going to not support this application because the budget for TAC is $20,000. Any dollars counted in that case. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Marco. And next is Judy.
I call the question on Russell's revised resolution.
Thank you, Judy. So we'll go to a vote. Will, I think we have 14 people present. I'm not sure how many community board members. Can you read off the list of people present?
Yeah, we did have a few leave. So we have Alita and Felice yourself, Russell, Anthony, Elizabeth Ashby, Gail Barron, Judy Schneider, Marco Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, Rebecca Dangor, and Sherry Weiner.
And what does that come to in terms of total
Sorry,
number?
that is 13, I believe, because there are 3 of us who are non-board members here.
Okay, thank you. And
Did I say 13? I said I meant 11.
It's 11.
11.
I'm sorry, guys. Math is hard.
Okay, there are 11 board members present. Is there anybody who wants to vote no, abstain, or not voting for cause? Michelle?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, no,
Marco?
No.
Okay, is there anybody else? Okay, seeing none, the vote passes. Motion passes 9 to 11. Or I have that wrong, I'm sorry. It passes 9 to 2.
Can I just say, I know math is hard. Can I just say thank you, everyone? I appreciate the support and hope that you will turn out for our events. And thank you to Will for all the hard work you do and your staff. And again, to Russell for your support. So we're looking forward to seeing you at our next stuff.
Thank you, Alita. I went to the last event, and I can see that you guys put in a lot of hard work to this, and it was a really terrific art show. Rebecca?
I didn't see you got to come by the table or find.
I don't want to skip over old business if we have any, but I did have one quick new business item that I don't think will be a discussion unless Judy is old business.
I think Judy's going to adjourn. So.
Okay, so I was just wondering if maybe before our next meeting as a committee, we could get an update on our request to allocate funds to provide video technology to people who did not have access to it. I would just like an update because that was something I was very passionate about making sure we used excess funds last time.
Will, do you have that?
Yeah, as far as like, if you recall, we received a council discretionary grant a while back that one Brooklyn Community Board spent on a car. And so we didn't do that. We were better than that. We bought tablets for all the board members, and some of the board members, you don't know this. We have these beautiful blue, no, they're not beautiful. They're clunky and they're ugly and they're meant to not be stolen. Tablets that would have basic PDF capacity. They're not Wi-Fi. They're Wi-Fi enabled. They're not cellular enabled. And so if there's somebody who needs a tablet, they are able to check one out from the board office. I have helped one person check out a tablet and sat down with that individual and walked her through them through how to use Zoom, set up an email just for that board members Zoom capacity. So if there's somebody else who needs access to a video tablet who's a board member, we can check out a tablet to you, and you can use that for any meetings that you need to go to for CB8.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I kind of knew that was the case, but I think that's something really cool this committee made an effort to solve. So.
And
Thank
that
you.
individual was very happy, and that individual's cat was very happy that I came to their house and demonstrated the tablet. And I enjoyed that part.
Thanks. Judy and then Alita.
I move to adjourn. I'm sorry if I cut you off, Alita.
And we have a second. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.